Welcome to the One Year Bible Reading Plan for February 5th. Join us today as we read through the books of Exodus chapter 21, verse 22 to chapter 23, verse 18, Matthew chapter 24, verse 1 through verse 28, Psalm 29, verse 1 through verse 11, and Proverbs chapter 7, verses 6 through 23. This is the word of the Lord. Exodus chapter 21, verse 22 to chapter 23, verse 13. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death. If a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to this same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. When a man opens a pit, or when a man digs a pit and does not cover it, and an ox or donkey falls into it, the owner of the pit shall make restoration. He shall give money to its owner, and the dead beast shall be his. When one man's ox butts another's, so that it dies, then they shall sell the live ox and share its price, and the dead beast also they shall share. Or if it is known that the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has not kept it in, he shall repay ox for ox, and the dead beast shall be his. If a man steals an ox or a sheep, and kills it or sells it, he shall repay 5 oxen for an ox, and 4 sheep for a sheep. If a thief is found breaking in, and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in his possession, whether it is an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. If a man causes a field or vineyard to be grazed over, or lets his beast loose, and it feeds in another man's field, he shall make restitution for the best of his own field, and in his own vineyard. If fire breaks out and catches in thorns, so that the stacked grain or the standing grain or the field consumed, he who started the fire shall make full restitution. If a man gives to his neighbor money or goods to keep safe, and it is stolen from the man's house, then, if the thief is found, he shall pay double. If the thief is not found, the owner of the house shall come near to God to show whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox, for a donkey, for a sheep, for a cloak, or for any kind of lost thing, of which one says, "This is it," the case of both parties shall come before God. The one whom God condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. If a man gives to his neighbor a donkey, or an ox, or a sheep, or a beast to keep safe, and it dies, or is injured, or is driven away without anyone seeing it, an oath by the Lord shall be between them both to see whether or not he has put his hand to his neighbor's property. The owner shall accept the oath, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn by beasts, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn. If a man borrows anything of his neighbor, and it is injured or dies, the owner not being with it, he shall make full restitution. If the owner was with it, he shall not make restitution. If it was hired, it came for its hiring fee. If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you do mistreat them, and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not extract interest from him. If ever you take your neighbor's cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for that is his only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. In what else shall he sleep? And if he cries to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay to offer from the fullness of your harvest, and from the outflow of your presses. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same for your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. You shall be consecrated to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with the many who do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many, so as to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to a poor man in his lawsuit. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying down under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it. You shall rescue it with him. You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in his lawsuit. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a sojourner. You know the heart of a sojourner, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat it, and what they leave the beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyard and with your olive orchard. 6 days you shall do your work, but on the 7th day you shall rest, that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and the son of your servant woman and the alien may be refreshed. Pay attention to all that I have said to you, and make no mention of the names of other gods, nor let it be heard on your lips. Matthew chapter 24, verses 1 through 28. Jesus left the temple and was going away, when his disciples came to point out to him the buildings of the temple. But he answered them, "You see all these, do you not? Truly, I say to you, there will not be left here one stone upon another that will not be thrown down." As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" And Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place. But the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let the one who is on the housetop not go down to take what is in his house. And let the one who is in the field not turn back to take his cloak. And alas for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter or on a Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation. such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be. And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Christ," or "There he is," do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders, so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. So if they say to you, "Look, he is in the wilderness," do not go out. If they say, "Look, he is in the inner rooms," do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the corpse is, the vultures will gather. Psalm 29, verses 1 through 11, a psalm of David. Ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders, the Lord over many waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon to skip like a calf, and Sirion like a young wild ox. The voice of the Lord flashes forth flames of fire. The voice of the Lord shakes the wilderness. The Lord shakes the wilderness of Kadesh. The voice of the Lord makes the deer give birth, and strips the forest bare, and in his temple all cry, "Glory!" The Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as a king forever. May the Lord give strength to his people. May the Lord bless his people with peace. Proverbs chapter 7, verses 6 through 23. For at the window of my house I have looked out through my lattice, and I have seen among the simple, I have perceived among the youths, a young man lacking sense, passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house in twilight, in the evening, at the time of night and darkness. And behold, the woman meets him, dressed as a prostitute, wily of heart. She is loud and wayward. Her feet do not stay at home. Now in the street, now in the market, and at every corner she lies in wait. She seizes him and kisses him, and with bold face she says to him, "I had to offer sacrifices, and today I have paid my vows. So now I have come out to meet you, to seek you eagerly, and I have found you. I have spread my couch with coverings, covered linen from Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love till morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. For my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He took a bag of money with him. At full moon he will come home." With much seductive speech she persuades him. With her smooth talk she compels him. all at once he follows her, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a stag is caught fast, till an arrow pierces its liver. As a bird rushes into a snare, he does not know that it will cost him his life. For our listeners, as a way of continuing to engage with God's Word, we at Grace Chapel, Antelope Valley invite you to listen to one of our previous sermons directly relating to the passage.
So we live in Southern California, which means we live right on the San Andreas Fault, right? Isn't that true? Yeah. So you guys everybody here is earthquake prepared? You guys are ready for an earthquake to hit? I mean, after all, it's not as if we haven't had a reminder that earthquakes happen, right? The last couple of, I see your light. I see your light. I see the light. Thank you. That's nice. You're like a spotlight for me. That's awesome. Okay. So I was like, okay, hon, help me to know how earthquake prepared are we? Where are we? So I went to the garage and I was like, this is so cool because we have a water container barrel for emergencies. And so it's really great to have. So I just carried it in here last night because it has no water in it. None. So then last night before I go to church, I go, hon, I just want you to go around the house and collect all of the flashlights that we have for emergencies. And it turns out we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 flashlights. And none of them work. None. Not one. Not one has batteries that work in them. They don't. So I came to the conclusion that while I, in my thinking, must think it's possible to have an earthquake, I don't think it's probable. Because if I thought there was going to be an earthquake today, there would be water in the barrel and there'd be lights, batteries in the lights. And so what I would submit to you is that most people in this room think it's possible that Jesus could come back, but most of us aren't living like it's probable. It's somewhere in the back of our mind. We know, but do we really believe it? And we come today to the Olivet Discourse. And the Olivet Discourse is okay, let me just set this up really simply for you. It's Wednesday night of the Passion Week. Jesus is about to go to the cross. His followers still are waiting for him to set up his kingdom. When he set up the kingdom, he keeps telling them, I'm going to the cross, I'm going to the cross, going to the cross. And so finally, he's still trying to communicate to them, this is what's coming. So what you're expecting to happen isn't what's going to happen. Be prepared for that. So here's the Olivet Discourse. The reason it's called that is he's on the Mount of Olives, which is about an elevation about 150 feet over Mount Moriah. So they would have a perfect view of the beautiful Herod's temple, right? So get that in your mind. And he gives them sort of honestly kind of his last big speech. They ask him a couple questions. We know from Matthew and from Mark, and then they count in Luke. They ask a couple questions like, okay, when's the temple going to be destroyed? Because he's going to tell them that. And then secondly, they ask him, when are you coming back? When is this second coming? And they're not getting it entirely. And so Jesus goes into a very long discourse. It's a little shorter in Luke than it is in Matthew, but the whole point of it is be prepared. Be ready. Now, what I want you to get into your minds as we go through this is I'm crazy because I'm going to do the whole Olivet Discourse in one sermon. And I'm going to do that for a reason, because I am convinced that when it comes to eschatology, we're making a huge mistake in the church. And here's the huge mistake. We have gotten so caught up in the details, which I'm all for. It's fun. I'll do Revelation class this summer. We got so caught up in, okay, are you pre-trib rapture, mid-trib, post-trib, no rapture, whatever. And we get it all into the charts and the graphs. What I want you to see today is this Olivet Discourse was not meant to be a thing for people to produce graphs from. And it wasn't even meant to satisfy his disciples' curiosity. Well, when are you coming back? What it was a pastor, a shepherd, loving his flock and saying, you know what? Hard times are coming, and I just want you to be prepared. You know what I have become increasingly upset about is the message that so much of the church is putting out in America, this health, wealth, prosperity thing. It just makes me so mad. And the reason it makes me mad is because it's not what Jesus said would be happening. And secondly, it causes disillusionment in people because they think, okay, I come to Christ and now my life's just going to be easy. And actually, Jesus said just the opposite. In this world, you'll have trouble. And so people get awful discouraged, right? They're like, oh, great, okay. That is not what Jesus promised. What Jesus promised is that it would be difficult, but the reward would be worth it. And so that's just kind of when even my wife this week went down to Dana Point for a ride on a boat with her family. She took the 2 smaller kids, and so she's walking down the dock, and she sees a really nice yacht at the end enclosure. Because remember, the weather was really bad. Remember, the weather was bad this last week. Wednesday it was bad, and the waves were really going down there. And so she's walking down this dock, and she sees this yacht that has indoor area, windows, and she's like, well, we'll be okay in there. This will be all right. It's family she never sees, so she went, took the kids, and as she's walking by this little tiny boat that's docked to the right, the family goes, oh, no, not that one, that one. And she just goes, oh, no. And the rest of the ride was brutal. They got out of that little boat. She goes, Chris, there was no place inside. The kids were sitting on the deck. She goes, I was literally just holding on to Hannah so she wouldn't go overboard. And she goes, Ryan was fine because, he's got moves. So he's just swaying. She's like, he's just dancing. It was no problem. She's like, Hannah was about to go. She goes, I was just clinging to her. And she goes, and this one lady got sick. And so there's only one metal cable that's holding people on. And they're out on this deck. And she goes, Chris, at one point, literally, it was as if I was standing up and I was laying down on the deck. The boat was that far over. What a blast. Here's what I want to tell you. We're going to cover this sermon all at once because Jesus gave it all at once. So even if we just read it today, I just want you to get what was Jesus trying to say. Here's what he was saying. He goes, it's not going to be a yacht ride for you, disciples. It's going to be rough. Things are going to be hard. Prepare yourself, but I'm coming back, and have yourself ready for that. Every time Jesus makes a future prediction, and he does it often, every time Jesus makes a future prediction in Scripture, it always has a present application. Because I'm coming back, what kind of people should you be? So let's just look at it together. Look at Luke chapter 21. Luke 21. Hey, I don't think it would be a bad thing. Honestly, I'll do more than this. It wouldn't be a bad thing for us just to read this. It's a sermon Jesus gave. We should be able to just read it, but you understand the context. In fact, I'm going to keep it simple. We begin in verse 5 of chapter 21. I'm just going to use the headings that are in my Bible. Maybe they're in your Bible. And we'll just use that as our outline today, just to keep it easy. So first thing we see is Jesus foretells the destruction of the temple. Look at it, verse 5. I'll read this section, and then we'll talk about it for a minute. And while some were speaking of the temple, how it was adorned with noble stones and offerings, he said, as for these things that you see, the days will come where there will not be one stone left on another, that will not be thrown down. And they asked him, Teacher, when will these things be? And what will be the sign when these things are about to take place? And he said, see that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is at hand. Do not go after them. And when you hear of wars and tumults, do not be terrified, for these things must first take place, but the end will not be at once. First thing Jesus says is, I'm going to destroy the temple. This temple is going to go down. That was unthinkable for them. They continued to believe Jesus was going to set up his kingdom. Where would the Messiah rule and reign from if he was going to set up his kingdom on earth? Jerusalem. Where? In the temple. This temple represented their religion. It represented everything it would be. You know what? Honestly, to them, this temple was such a magnificent structure. Truly. Herod had rebuilt it. It was over the top. It was like one of the 7 wonders of the world. That the temple was remarkable that Herod had built. I saw one of the foundation stones, actually, they're still there. One of the foundation stones is the size of a freight car that a train would pull. A stone that they quarried, they rolled down in, set in place. That's how they expanded the Temple Mount so this temple it was 1 mile around the temple. It was bigger than Super Walmart, okay? It was huge. It was marble. It was plated with gold. It was gorgeous. And these guys are mesmerized by it. And no doubt in my mind, they're thinking, it's going to be really cool to rule from there with you. Look at our palace. And what Jesus is trying to do is he's trying to change their expectations of the future so that they will be ready and not be caught off guard. And so he just goes, you know what? This place is going to be destroyed. Now, I do think, if I could pause for just a minute, I think there's a connection here. Now, stay with me for just a minute. Remember what happened 2 weeks ago I spoke. Remember what happened, the widow's offering? Remember that? The widow comes, offer. And remember I told you, we always use that as this good example. Be like the widow, give like the widow, give your last 2 cents to God. And even pastors have used this as, so be like her if you have, whatever. I don't think that that's the main thing there. I actually think this is a bad example of how these Jewish leaders were taking advantage of even widows. They would get rich even off the back of widows. They were pathetic. And by the way, just so that I don't sound too harsh on them, I think that happens today in the church too. Yeah, I'm going to step on someone's toes right now, but at least I don't weigh that much. It won't hurt too bad. You know what? It happens on Christian TV all the time. You just watch it. They're preying on vulnerable people. That's what was going on here. And you know what? This temple was a symbol of that religion. And you know what I think Jesus is saying is, I'm taking that out. This is going to go away. There's going to be an end to this. And by the way, he'll put an end to that kind of abuse in the church as well. He'll deal with it. He's not pleased. And nobody's fooling him. So I think there's an important point here that Jesus just says, I'm going to overthrow this false religion. It's not a worship of God. They're worshiping themselves. They're serving themselves. And so it says in verse 6, is for these things that you see, the days will come when there will not be one stone left upon another. Literally in AD 70, Titus, the emperor of Rome, came in and destroyed this temple. He did not intend on the temple being destroyed when he took Jerusalem, but it was destroyed. It was set on fire. The gold melted, fell into the cracks, and they literally ended up coming and throwing all of the stones off the Temple Mount to get the harvest, if you will, the gold out between those cracks. It was annihilated. And so we see that Jesus goes, I'm going to put an end to false religion. I'm going to put an end to these people that claim to know me, but they don't know me. They're just serving themselves. I guess I feel convicted about that to some degree. That we need to make sure that we're real. So when I hear Steve Standiford come up here and talk about what's going on at the jail, I'm just thinking, you know what? I just want to make sure. That's the kind of stuff we should get excited about. Somebody just this last week said, Chris, you sure we shouldn't build a bigger worship center? You sure we shouldn't build a bigger church? I'm like, this is the time. This church is growing. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm not going to be a part of that. You know what I mean? It's just because I'm like, man, we spend enough on ourselves. Let's just not even get into that mode. Whatever. I'm sorry. That's totally not in my notes, but then again, I haven't looked at them yet, so who knows? Okay. Look at verse 8. And he said to them, see that you're not led astray, for many will come in my name saying, I am he, and the time is at hand. Do not go after them. You might say, well, no, it doesn't really happen today. These deceivers that say, oh, Jesus is coming. Yeah, it actually does. When I was, actually the year we got married, and I was going to, there was a guy that wrote a book called 88 Reasons Jesus Will Return in 1988. Bestseller. It's an embarrassing book to have on your shelf in 1989. and as a matter of fact, he wrote another book in 1989. He had to. 89 Reasons Jesus Will Come Back in 1989. Thankfully, he didn't write one for 1990. Because no doubt people would have quit buying it by then. What's the point here? Jesus said no one knows the day or the hour. I think Jesus is purposely just saying, this is not about you having all of the answers. And we seem to get so excited about that too. Well, I know that, and I got all this figured out. I just think we just need to be humble and just goes, hey, you know what? I don't know the day or the hour. I just know he's coming back. Do you really believe that? Do you really? You might say, well, how come you really believe it? You know why I believe in the second coming? Because of his first coming. Because of the resurrection. Well, let's keep going. So Jesus says, you know what? This is going to be taken out. This temple is going to be destroyed. I'm going to tear down this false religion. And not only that, but just know there's going to be wars, terrible times. But you know what? Don't be terrified. These things got to take place. But you know what? The end will come. Look at verse 10. Jesus foretells wars and persecution. So he dashes their hope of ruling from this temple. I'm not setting up my kingdom. I'm going to the cross. They wanted a crown. He says, I'm going to go to the cross. Verse 10. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes and in various places famines and pestilences, and there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. But before all that, they will lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up in the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. So there's going to be these earthquakes that will happen, and there's going to be famine. There's going to be people starving. Sounds a lot like what goes on the earth today, as a matter of fact. And then he says, there's going to be persecutions. And if I could just say for a minute, that was the story of the early church. That's what went on in the early church. If you read through the book of Acts, they're constantly persecuted, brought before the Sanhedrin. And it was both in the synagogues, and so it was religious persecution, but it was also Roman persecution. And what I love is that in their persecutions, what continued to be produced was their testimony. That actually, what Satan intended for evil is actually being used for good. I think that's happening in America. I think that we are moving into a time where there's an increasing animosity toward Christians. And what we like to do is complain about it, whine about it. Oh, you're picking on us. I want my rights, whatever. But in the early church, they actually thought of it as a privilege. In Acts chapter 5, the Bible says they beat them, and then they got out of jail beaten, literally bloodied, and they got out of jail, and they rejoiced that they were counted worthy to suffer for the name. I don't think it'll be a bad thing. I know it sounds really weird, but in a way, I'm kind of getting excited. I'm like, this is going to be so good for the American church. Because we'll begin to see who's real and who's not. Fire tends to sort of test a person's authenticity. Is it really gold or not? Just fire it up. We'll see. Look at verse 13. This will be your opportunity to bear witness. There it is. So Satan tries to crush the glass, and it just spreads it out. As it breaks, it just goes to other places. In fact, if you read the book of Acts, don't miss this. God is explaining, he's showing us how the gospel spread around the world. One of the ways he spread it was through persecution. So they would flee, they would go to other areas. There you have it. Verse 14. Settle it therefore in your minds not to meditate beforehand on how to answer. You're not going to be alone. He's going to give you the words. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which none of your adversaries will be able to withstand or contradict. And so that's not an excuse to not prepare for a sermon, right? Don't think of beforehand what you're going to say. You prepare, but then you just submit yourself to the Spirit's power and let him speak through you. But in this case, specifically what he's saying is, you know what, don't worry about it. You're not going to be alone. That's why Jesus sent the Comforter. So he's saying, I'm going to go away. It's going to be difficult, but you won't be alone. Verse 16, you will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends. And some of you, they will put to death. And so that persecution will even come at times from within our own families. They'll oppose Christ, and so they'll oppose us. Verse 17, you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but not a hair on your head will perish, but by your endurance, you will gain your lives. In other words, what he's saying is this, is that the worst thing they can do is take your physical life, but as you stand firm on Christ, you have eternity. You're indestructible. Do you live that way? Do you really believe that? So Jesus says, don't fear. As you stand firm, remember your reward. He then goes on and talks about the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, I know that there's a lot of different views. People take things out of that. And it certainly seems clear to me that we still face all of those things. And that was what was going to lead up to the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem itself as a city where the temple resided. But regardless of what your view is of the timing of these things, I just want to encourage you today, God knows what he's doing. And life is hard. And then we get to go be with Jesus. So this is not for me to somehow debate with you today about the timing. I'm not interested. This summer I'm going to teach Revelation. If you want to come to that, I'll give you the proper view of eschatology. Then we'll settle it there. Just kidding. We will go through God's Word together and do our best to understand it. You know, the truth is scholars have debated this discourse forever, and I'm not a scholar. I do know Jesus is coming back. And are you ready? So he moves on. I love this. Jesus foretells the destruction of Jerusalem, which we know happened. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, that would be the Roman army, then you will know that its desolation has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Why? Because there's not going to be any angel coming to rescue them. You just better get out, because this is coming. Flee, which we know that Christians did. They went across the Jordan into Perea to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart, and let those who are out in the country enter it. For these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written. This city that hung the Messiah is going to pay a price. Alas, for women who are pregnant and for those who are nursing infants in those days, a time where you're supposed to be happy, you better get out. For there will be great distress upon the earth and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all the nations and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. And the idea there, Romans chapter 11 talks about this, is God is saying, you know what? Israel, my people, my beloved, my spiritual wife, I'm her husband, has rejected me, and there's judgment that's going to come. And I'm going to have this season called the time of the Gentiles, described in Romans chapter 11, which is the time that we live in today, where Jesus is building his church. But when the fullness of the Gentiles has come in, God will once again work through this nation, because they did not sin beyond recovery, because God's promises and gifts are irrevocable. Romans chapter 11. So, what's the point of all this? What's the point of this? What Jesus is telling his disciples is real simple. The temple that you're just marveling in right now, it's coming down. I'm destroying that false religion. That's coming down. The city that you're in, this is going to be destroyed. What your plan isn't what God's plan is. Does that ever happen to you? What happens? What happens when you make your plans and then God doesn't abide by your plans? How do you usually feel? Disappointed, disillusioned, discouraged. Listen, God's only doing one thing on the earth today. You know what it is? Building his church. It's the time of the Gentiles. He's building his church. I'm thankful that he allowed this time to take place because that's how I came to know Jesus. And so we see that Jerusalem will be destroyed. And then he describes the coming of the Son of Man, his return. Look at verse 25. And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars and the earth, distress of nations and perplexity. So a time of confusion on the earth, difficulty because of the roaring of the sea and the waves. Remember I talked about my wife out on that boat. It's going to be like that. You're going to be on a little boat and it's going to be really violent. Verse 26, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. Read about the tribulation in the book of Revelation. It's horrendous. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then you will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud. So Jesus comes into this chaos with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise up your heads because your redemption is drawing near. What is he doing? He's just going, okay, it's going to be rough, but it's going to end well. I'm coming back. It's going to be okay. Have you ever gone to the dentist? Of course you have. You've gone to the dentist. I got to the dentist. You go to the dentist, and have you ever had to get Novocaine, a shot of Novocaine in your mouth? And they say, you're going to feel a little pinch. You ever had that happen? You're going to feel a little pinch. Why do they do that? You know why they do that? Because when they give you that shot into your gums, they don't want you to flip out and kick them in the nose. You know what I'm saying? It's not good if you're leaning over somebody and they just wham! You could imagine. They're trying to prepare you so that your reaction is tempered, that you control yourself. That's what Jesus is doing. He's going, oh, it's okay. But remember that it'll be a little pinch, then we'll get the work done, but at the end of the day, your toothache will be gone. This is for the good. Have you ever had to give your kids a shot? You don't give them, I hope you don't give them shots, but we used to discipline that way, but we've stopped. And have you ever, I remember one time here at the church, somebody had a brilliant idea. Let's do flu shots at the church. This is before I was the pastor. We'll never do that again. Because this is what happened. You guys are going, well, it would be a good idea. This is where it went wrong. I take my kids in there. We're just coming to the church. I take my kids. Let's get the kids a free flu shot. It's a good idea. We take them in there right over here in what is, it used to be the prayer room and now it's the cry room. This is how it got that name. So we're doing shots over there, okay? And my kids go in there and they're like, get their shot. In fact, Judy, I think you were a part of it. It was you. And I think you might have even been the one that said this because I took the kids over there and they go, she looks at me, it was you. I'm sure it was. It's coming back to me now. Bitterness, rage, anger. She goes, it's your turn, Dad. Because I gave my kids this whole little pep talk. Okay, guys, this is good for you. I know it's going to hurt in the short term, but in the long term, this is going to be good. Hang in there. It's going to keep you from this or whatever. So I give them the whole speech. She hears me give the speech. And then she goes, okay, your turn. Oh, well, my kids are standing. What can I say now? I was like, well, no. I don't need that. What I just said to them doesn't apply to me. So I got my shot that day. The point is, the pain is temporary. The benefits are great. See what I'm saying? So Jesus is saying, I'm going to come back. Keep your heads up. Your redemption's drawing near. So for us, honestly, the idea would be as the worse things get, the more optimistic we should be. And Jesus illustrates it with a parable. The lesson of the fig tree. Here it is, verse 29. He says this, and he told them a parable. Look at the fig tree and all the trees. As soon as they come out in leaf, you see for yourselves and know that summer is already near. Summer's near, but it hasn't arrived. This is so important. My trees at my house, we have some trees. We have some plum trees, fruitless plum trees right outside of our windows in our kitchen that we planted. And we were so excited last week because it was great weather last week. The blossoms came out. Are your trees, they got the blossoms, the little flowers? If they don't, they're dead. So, they're kind of, they're coming out. We're like, yeah. Because I don't know about you. I don't like cold weather. I'm a Southern California boy all the way. I don't know what I would do if God ever called me to go to Green Bay. I have no idea. You know what I mean? I'd be a snowbird pastor. You know what I'd be like? Okay, I'm going to Arizona. I'll come back. I just don't think I could. So you look at those and it's like, man, and even my wife, it's so funny. She hates wearing shoes. Is anyone else here that hates wearing shoes? She loves flip-flops. Just loves them. I don't like flip-flops. They make my heels hard. You know what I mean? I like softy. So check this out. We're seeing these blossoms. We're getting this hope. We're like, oh, summer's here. She busted out her flip-flops this week. It happens every year. She puts her winter clothes away too soon, right? And so you're thinking, okay, the blossoms have hit. It's time to bust out the shorts and the flip-flops. It was a miserable week. The weather was horrible. It was freezing. So do the blossoms mean that summer has come? No. What does it tell us, though? It's coming. That's what Jesus is trying to say. So we see wars, rumors of wars. We see pestilence. We see starvation. We see disease. What does it remind us? This world is in trouble. We need someone to come rescue us. Jesus says, I'm on my way. Now you see those things, in a way, let it be an encouragement to you. Summer's coming. Hang in there. So then finally, as I said at the beginning of the sermon, anytime Jesus talks or gives predictions, talks about prophecy or the future, he always applies it to the present. That is the mistake the church is making. And I must confess to you, I don't think I've done a good job with this. I don't think I've denied it, but I don't think I've emphasized it enough, the coming of Jesus Christ. In fact, I think that's just the trend in the church in America. We talk a lot less about the second coming of Christ, and we talk a lot more about how to live your best life now. Our focus in the Church of America has been mostly on the here and now. And the focus Jesus had is what comes later. And we don't live right in the here and now if we don't focus on what comes later. So let's just look at this. This is Jesus. Okay, I just read you the whole sermon he gave. Okay, I just did the whole thing, all of a discourse. They're looking at this great temple. That's going to be destroyed. Not only that, the whole city is going to be destroyed. But don't lose heart. I'm coming back. Hang in there. And when you see these things coming, just know I'm on my way. Hang in there. And then he says this. This is his application to this. But watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the cares of this life. And that day will come upon you suddenly like a trap. In other words, you get so consumed with the world that you forget that I'm coming back. For it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the earth. And so this is a universal coming. It's the whole earth. Verse 36. But stay awake at all times, praying that you may have strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of Man. So you know what? Pray or fall is what he says. Verse 37. And every day he was teaching in the temple. But at night he went out and lodged in the mountain called Olivet. And early in the morning, all the people came to him in the temple to hear him. So what is Jesus saying here? What he's saying is he's going two things. He goes, my second coming, my return should provide for you two things. Number one, comfort. And number two, conviction. It should comfort you. Hey, listen, I understand that there's pain on this earth. I see it every day. I did a funeral yesterday. Probably 1,000 people were there. Close to it. A lot of people. It was packed. For a local principal. Guy that I had become acquainted with because I did his son's funeral. 19-year-old, 5 years ago, that was killed in a car accident. A really nice man. But I look across that room, I see grief. I see the grief of a widow. I see the grief of families that are at odds and difficulty and the pain that comes. Hey, let me just tell you something. If this is utopia, if this is heaven, we're all in big trouble. So it should provide comfort, and I'm going to talk about that just for a minute. And secondly, it should provide some conviction. Or maybe if you want to put this, maybe it's better to say it this way. Maybe it's better, instead of conviction, use the word conformity. Conformity to Christ. It should cause us to live more like Christ. Now, I'm just about out of time, so I'm going to wrap this up. So let me just take you to two passages. Hebrews chapter 10, 24 and 25. I just want to spend a minute comforting you. I just want to tell you, you know what? We have a lot to be thankful for, but we also have a lot to look forward to when we're with Christ. Whether we meet him at his return or whether we meet him through death. That it's okay. You're going to be okay. Hang in there. Listen to this in Hebrews 10, 24 and 25. Let us consider how we may stir one another to love and good works. I love that. We're supposed to be thinking about, do you do this? When you come to church, you're supposed to think about, who can I minister to today? How do most people come to church? Let's be honest. How are you going to minister to me today? That's why church stinks for a lot of people. Not here, other ones. But you know what I mean. Right? Don't we do that? Like, how many times have you heard somebody say this over the years? I left that church because I just wasn't being fed. Have you ever thought about it this way? Who are you feeding? You hear people say, well, church just doesn't do anything for me. Yeah, but the question is, what are you doing for the church? And I don't mean just like, oh, I paint. What I mean is you come to church and you look around a room and you're just like, who can I love on today? Who can I just encourage? Hebrews 3:13 says, but encourage one another daily as long as it is called today, so that none of you are hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Did you catch that? Encourage one another daily. Why? It only takes one day to get spiritually discouraged. And that can set your life on a course that can run for years, just because nobody came alongside and just picked you up in that moment. What a difference. Oh, well. Verse 25. It's not even what I'm talking about today. Okay, verse 25. Not neglecting to meet together, as some are in the habit of some. This is a favorite verse of a pastor who's talking to somebody that hasn't been coming to church. Don't give up meeting together. But really, what's the point of it? But encouraging one another. We need encouragement. And all the more as we see the day drawing near, the day of Christ's return, the day of judgment. Okay. So be encouraged today. Hang in there. Don't lose heart. Don't give up. You know, Dean used to coach cross country. I coached cross country with him for a while too, and it was this dumb. Anyhow, I know some of you cross country runners. Dean still loves it. I still, though, I ran it in high school, and then I would coach it, and we would run with those kids out there. And I'm out there in 100-degree temperatures running. And I remember one day I was with a kid that actually grew up at the church here, went to the school. And in fact, his last name's Runner. But we were running cross country together, and I was the coach. He was a runner. We were running by Taco Bell, and both of us just looked at each other. We're like, enough. This is dumb. Dean, I don't even know if you know this or not, but we actually, I was his assistant coach so at that time, so I apologize. We actually went into Taco Bell, got something to drink, sat in the air conditioning, and just caught up with the team later. We did. I know. It's true. We did. I know. I'm so sorry. Does Dwayne ever come to work for you? He does. Okay, I was just checking. You know how kids do that in school growing up with their twin? They switch classes? I was just wondering. Just part his hair on the other side. Good. Okay, so we're even. All right. We just quit. We gave up. We did. We just lost heart. Now, the sad part, I was supposed to be the coach. I wasn't supposed to be collaborating in this horrible thing. But in cross country, one of the things I do love about cross country is it's an individual sport because it kind of goes on your time. That's cool, right? So you can improve. You always know how you improve. But the second thing is it's a really great team sport. So it's both. So you're running your race, but you're not running it alone. And Dean would tell you this. We used to always do this. Even after a kid would finish a race or even a practice, if you're done, you go space out back on that course and you stand alongside. And so every 100 yards, 200 yards, somebody's just going, keep going. Don't give up. You can hit it. There's a finish line. Go, 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 go. That's what he's saying here. As Christians, we're supposed to just be lined up as we're each running our own race, right? Striving for that finish line, that we're just lined up, encouraging, keep going, keep going, keep going. Why? The day's approaching. Our hope is that Jesus is coming back. So comfort. The second thing is conviction, and I'm out of time. Or Christ. Turn to 1 John chapter 3. And I'm going to steer you somewhere. Maybe this afternoon you could read this, but go to 2 Peter chapter 3 as a further study. How about that? We won't have time to get to it. It just deals with the people that are just going, oh no, he's never coming back. He's never coming back. And Peter just goes, no, he's coming back. And here's their argument. 2 Peter 3. So I'm going to get into it here. Their argument was this. He hasn't come back yet, so why should we think he's coming back? Here's what that's like saying, okay? I haven't died yet, so why should I think I'm going to die? You know, that's the logic. People come and say, well, he's not coming back. He hasn't come back in 2,000 years. He hasn't come back, so it proves he's not coming back. No, you only can come back and judge the earth once. That's going to happen one time. The reason he hasn't come back yet is because he's patient, not wanting anyone to perish. So the logic is this. And what it says in 2 Peter is it says, these people say that he's not coming back because it's convenient for them. Because if there's no accountability, I can live however I want. And even then he goes back and reminds them, God created the earth and he'll judge the earth. And so he's just going through this. And I love what he does here in 2 Peter 3, because what he says is he goes, okay, we have this creation and we certainly live in a time of this. And people want to deny there's a creator. Why? Because it serves their selfish, sinful desires. If there's no creator, then there's no accountability and I don't ever have to answer to him. I can live how I want. That there's a reason behind this movement to say, yeah, there's no creator, no creator, no creator, even though there's a creation. And then they say, see, he hasn't come back yet. He's not coming back. See, you haven't died yet, so you're not dying? Really? So then 1 John chapter 3, verse 1. I love this verse right here. 1 John 3, 1-3. And with this we'll close. And I think we'll just go ahead and not sing our closing song. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. We do not remember that enough. You know the best thing you got going in your life? You know the best thing you got going? It's not your house, your job, your car, whatever. God calls you his kid. He loves you. Period. I love that verse. It's my favorite verse in the Bible. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him because we shall see him as he is. So he's going to transform us. And everyone who has thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. You see what he's saying? He is directly connecting the second coming of Christ with the way we live our lives. Because we understand there is accountability, and I want to be ready for when he returns. And so my pursuit of my life becomes, I want to be Christ-like. I find comfort in his coming. I find this challenge to be Christ-like in his coming. You want to know why I think the church has become more worldly? Is because we don't talk very much about his second coming. It's convenient. What do we mostly talk about in the church today? The here and now. How do I get through life? How can I, even a lot of the seminars churches do, how to make a fortune as a Christian, how to do this, how to run a business, fine, that's all great, but at the end of the day, none of that matters. Jesus is coming back. John Piper said this. He said, you're either a jellyfish or a dolphin as a Christian. You're either just being thrown around by the waves or you're swimming through them. I love that picture. John Wesley said this. If he was asked if you were told that Christ is coming back tomorrow, what would you do differently? And you know what he answered? I love this. He said, nothing. I hope that I'm living every day like he could come back tomorrow. And so, may God purge our hearts of perishable delights, that we wouldn't get so caught up in the things of this world that we'd realize this isn't the prize. It's coming. May he purge our hearts of those perishable delights and also our pitiful distresses. Why do we get so stressed out about the circumstances of this world? Why as Christians, we know how it ends. It ends well. You know what it would be like doing, honestly? It would be like me watching the 1988 Dodger World Series. Game 1. And I'm watching game 1. I'm like, oh, great. Canseco just hit a grand slam. Stink. It's 4-0. And then, a couple of other home runs later, Mickey Hatcher hits a couple home runs. I'm like, okay, we're coming back. And then all of a sudden, it's down to the last out in the 9th inning. Kirk Gibson goes walking out to the plate. And I've seen it a gazillion times. I own it. I watch it just for fun. But it would be like me sitting there going, oh, hon, come on. I'm stressed out. And I'm just going, help me out, Kristen. Help me get through this. And she's like, hon, he hits the home run again. It's a video. You see what I'm saying? I know how the game ends. What am I so stressed out about? The first time I must admit I was stressed out. But really? You know how it's going to end. Don't be stressed out. Be comforted. Let's pray. Thank you, God, for your word. Thank you for this reminder and warning. And I pray that it would just cause us to live our lives differently, Lord. I pray that even today, as Jesus warned his disciples, that it wasn't what they were going to expect, but that he would be with them, that we would find comfort in that. Lord, and we confess to you, we don't fully get all of this, but we get enough of it to know that we should live more Christ-like lives and that we should find comfort. And Lord, I pray today that your people would comfort one another, even as we end this service, that your people would comfort one another. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.